Aloha, welcome to Facing Our Future. I'm your host, Angus McKelvey, and once again, we look at the subjects and challenges of Hawaii as we face our future. Today, we're turning to a very timely subject, cyber war, cyber terrorism. Not bombs, but bytes. Are they the next threat to our security, both nationally and in the state of Hawaii? And on this subject, I'm glad to be joined by our guest, General Wong, the Adjutant General for the National Guard of Hawaii. Aloha, welcome to being here. Thanks for being here. Okay, cyber terrorism, cyber war, cyber attacks. A lot of people hear this, they see in the popular media, but how big of an issue is this? How big should people seriously be paying attention to what is going on in these areas, both here and abroad?
I think it's a major issue that people need to be concerned about, and it's not at only a national level or even at a state level. It's a personal thing with everyone. As you know, your identities can be stolen, and it's getting easier and easier. Your computers, your personal computers, and that could lead to a lot of things. Even your workplace can lead to leaks, things getting into your system that could lead to another computer that could lead to national security. It's the awareness of how open the architecture is and how it can be used by a lot of people very creatively, which they're already doing. And a lot of times when they find something has happened, someone's been there for a while already. So, there's...
So they've already had a presence in the system, so to speak. So is this where you see some of the common spyware, malware that lurks within the system, and that is where they can open a port or be able to make an attack when they see that there's no security or oversight going on?
Well, there's different actors. There's the state actors, the major countries everyone talks about. There's a middle of the road of maybe those that are trying to do this for business espionage, and then there's these other ones that you talk about where they're going to find the easiest way to do things. If you and I had some strong defenses on our computers, they would bypass us, but they're just going to go to those that don't have any, and then they'll start working back up from there. So usually, just being aware and putting the best security you can at this point, well, at least you'll be one of the less, you won't be one of the easy ones that they can get to, so to speak.
Exactly, yes. And it's more than just your personal identification
yes.
here. It becomes a pathway within your corporate intranet, within your own system potentially as well, right? So
I kind of half joke to my secretary because I'm on an Air Force system and she's on the state system. If the Air Force system gets so locked down, then the state system doesn't improve its security, that she won't be able to email me. But that is coming. I think people need to be aware that that is going to come. Even private businesses that want to work with the military will need to have some sort of program for their employees, as well as some level of security to allow them into their systems. So these are things that are coming down the road. Some are already here.
On your work, with the national government on the national front, with the military and the Pentagon, how big of an issue is this on the national level? And is the Pentagon and military engaging the states like Hawaii to create a coordinated system of defense and awareness on this?
Yeah, to give you an example, a lot of people talk about attack versus defend. I mean, we're not even talking about attack. Attack is a whole different issue.
We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, okay. But here, if we use Hawaii as an example, and this is being talked at a national level, it's being talked at the governor's level. Our governor was on the Council of Governors, and that has been a huge issue. And we've even had a very detailed meeting last week concerning this. So people think it's a national Department of Defense thing, or it's a Homeland Security thing. As you know, Department of Defense will take care of the .mil, and then DHS, or Department of Homeland Security, takes care of the rest. But you know that .mil or .com will interrelate anyway. So you cannot really separate the defense by two different departments. So they're really working how the Department of Defense and Homeland Security really integrate the use of people to defend and respond against any type of cyber attack.
And this is on a multi-level, right?
Yes.
Across many fronts right there. You know, when you have, one of the things that comes up, you talked about ID theft, you know, security theft. Is one of the concerns going forward that, you know, that some of the IDs that could be stolen could then be repurposed to create fraudulent IDs, not only for a cyber intrusion, but also for perhaps a personal intrusion, i.e. somebody's got a security card now with the name of somebody else that has clearance they can get through?
Yeah, I'm sure these things are all in the realm of possibilities that they're probably being used now that a lot of us may not even be aware of. But even the issue of, you know, your computer at work, and then your company at work eventually may deal with a company that does national defense, and it could be far removed, but you could be the single point of entry, and it gets through a lot of different things, and eventually get to a bigger company or get to the Pentagon.
Like, for instance, you could have a company here locally that's doing work to make airplane wings perhaps more aerodynamic. They, in turn, are sending information. They get attacked from a state actor from someplace else. In essence, they could not only go in and steal that technology, but they could also use it as a gateway to other systems that might be within the military or government.
Well, yes, that's exactly what you're talking about. You know, you cannot separate the civilian sector from the military sector at this point with the internet, because private companies are doing business with the military. And like I go back, it could be one individual, that could be someone in your company that really doesn't have a direct tie to some of the marketing or the negotiating, but because they're part of your business, they could be the single point of failure, and it just gets through the system and eventually get downrange to
yeah, and it makes it harder to track it back sometimes to the actor themselves. You know, if it's coming from, say, this fictional company, the attack gets back to them, there's a good chance that they may not be able to go back and back and back and find the attacker. Or do you think now that there are, with the companies themselves and other things, that there is a way to quickly identify who the originating, or at least where the attack is originating from geographically, or from what entity it might be coming from? Or is that still a guessing game?
I don't want to say it's a guessing game. You're going to have to put in place something to monitor that. But in most small companies, probably can't put the investment into that. But again, if they are potentially going to do business with an entity like the Department of Defense or some other type of entity that eventually will get to the Department of Defense, I see in the years to come, there's going to be some strict protocols and policies in place for if you and I were to start a company, and if we were to do any kind of business that would lead to some other areas, so even the financial district, that we would have, our employees would have to have some kind of a education process. Our systems would have to be locked down, and how they would monitor you and I individually is that we would have to log in, and that way, if we are sending things outside of the company that is not where it normally should go, they can find it. Right now, we don't have that in place yet.
How do you create the dividing line, though? You know, for instance, like this is where the blurring begins. You have people who are working for the company, but they have personal things, a personal Facebook, personal email, whatever. Yet, you know, the company comes say, hey, we have strict protocols, we're doing business with the military, you have to go through the system. How do you keep the private side of the employee, you know, from colliding with this? And do you think there's going to be issues moving forward in the workforce with employees saying, hey, that's my private time, I'm at home doing this. Why do I have to go to the system? Why do I have to use an RSA key to log in every time I just want to update my Facebook page and show a photo of my noodles?
But I think, you know, it's programs like these, there is an outreach where you're letting people know that there is a problem like that, and it's incumbent not on the government, but it's incumbent on every individual to understand what potentially doing something like this at your, say, work computer can do. Your private computer is another issue, but at your work computer, you may fully understand why the company would put in place a policy like that. So you would probably not balk against it, but understanding the importance of that you could hurt your company by doing some of these personal things.
So you almost need like a World War II. Remember those posters that used to come out saying, you know, loose lips sink ships, be careful what you do. But I mean, it's definitely brings back, but that kind of touches upon education. You know, when you have the protocols for employees, but to do a PR educational thing, say, hey, you know, loose lips sink ships, i.e. you sending an email out or a casual Facebook post from your computer is just the same as possibly picking up the phone and calling.
Well, you know, nowadays with social media, you know, a lot of our young kids are out on ships at different parts of the world. they go online and they tell their tell their friends, hey, I'm here in the middle of blankety blank, and they could and someone could track where our ships are by just through social media.
Especially when the location thing, right? On Facebook, it says you can identify your location, and even though there's fuzzing that goes on, here you were still within 10 kilometers of the actual GPS reading. That's close enough to cause a lot of security issues, right?
And that goes to the public awareness of what job you're doing at any one given time. There may be things you don't want to post on social media because it's beyond just your own personal, letting your friends what you're doing. You're letting other people know where, what ship you're on or what your unit is, where they are, and things like that. So, the social media is just a whole different issue.
Well, and one of these things actually do also create a blurring, because a lot of people have their personal cell phones, but they'll go ahead and use the email client to sign up to multiple, their personal and their corporate email. And as a result, you now have this conduit through a mobile computer, your phone, that could possibly use as a, but people don't know that. They think, oh, it's convenience, I can check my email at work from home. So those are the kinds of areas really companies should be aware of, right? In educating their employees and as well as developing protocol, right?
And that's exactly true. And now it's not in the realm that can't happen. People can load something onto that that you don't even know about, and they can turn it on as you go into a meeting, and it could be a business meeting. They could be learning a lot about, if they're buying a company or they're going to negotiate a contract, they could be learning a lot about things that maybe shouldn't be on by you bringing in your cell phone, and it's getting turned on, which you're not even knowing.
Yeah, this happened recently, where the phone got turned on. You go ahead, you get your email, oh, look, there's some ad for something, you click the link, you forget about it, and it goes to an ad page, but then you now have malware on your phone that can turn itself on and do recordings and transfer these video files, compress them down, and send them to a proxy server, which can then send them someplace else, right?
Yeah, and as you talk about some people that are stealing, say our personal information, there's people that are stealing a lot of it, and they in turn will sell that to somebody else. So, it could be a fundraiser for terrorist groups. Yeah, but in the realm of state actors, all the way to just the onesie twosies, the terrorists nowadays are not using it as everyone think they are, but eventually they will, because it is a way to raise funds.
Now, when you do analysis of attacks and breaches, do you find that these actual terrorist groups or non-originated point source attacks are a predominant, or do you see a lot of them coming from either state actors or from within elements, like say within Russia, within organized crime, like the password culling that just happened recently?
Well, some of it gets in an area I can't really talk much about, but there's a lot of people gaining information so that say technology, rather than going to school or buying the technology, you can go in and hack into a college or industry and bring out all that technology. And you've learned quite a bit, much quicker than if you had to develop it yourself. So these are some of the things that are happening just on the education side, and even on industry side. One thing that happened to one of the big states in the United States, and it's only being able to talk about it probably within the last year, is the state was going to bid out $1 billion type contract, and the CIA had to come to them to tell them that your system was hacked and a lot of the information being exfiltrated. And then when you do the forensics, the company that finally won the bid was one of these countries that had been able to exfiltrate a lot of this information. So, it is here, it's already being done. And if you bury your head in the sand and says it can't be done, it's already there. The bad thing is that you can't just stop it right there, because as soon as you let them know that they'll go in a different way. So you almost have to not stop it, but how much do you let happen so you don't hurt yourself? So going back into the future where you need to put these things in place up front, so the upfront cost will keep you from, it'll cost you 10 times more to fix than it is to put it up in the upfront cost.
Definitely. Our connections to each other is a sign of our society, but could there be our vulnerability too? We'll be right back on that subject and more after these messages.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong-Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha, welcome back to our show, and thanks you for joining us. We're here with General Wong. And General Wong, you also work with Homeland Security on these issues, in Hawaii. How important is cybersecurity, cyber terrorism to Homeland Security, both here in Hawaii and broadly across the United States?
So Representative McKelvey, you and I have had a lot of these discussions, and you were very instrumental in pushing a bill that created a cyber coordinator in the state of Hawaii, which is really important. If you look at the state of Hawaii, our critical infrastructure very fragile. We have one water system, we have one power system. We have financial systems here and everything. But the customers to the state of Hawaii's critical infrastructure are very key customers. The PACOM, all the major military's headquarters of the Pacific are here, and the launching of any sort of attacks, or what do you call launching air war from here into the Pacific, is going to be coordinated from here. So they're going to use a lot of our critical infrastructure, the power, the water, our broadband. All these things are very important to our customers, even our financial district. Financial industry. And then if you and I were to start a high-tech company here, we want to make sure that the energy is secure and the broadband is secure, so that we don't lose intellectual property, that we can continue to operate as a high-tech company. These companies that want to move to Hawaii, or it currently exists, are going to need all that, and that's why this is the infrastructure and the ability to secure it from cyber attack is very important.
Well, also, wasn't there like a white paper done a few years ago or something along that effect that pointed out that the vulnerability, of the military bases and installations, certain areas could be tied to the civilian infrastructure around it? Case in point, you have these bases that are around Oahu and other places, but they have the same power company, the same water company, and everything else. And if you bring those down, you in essence could cripple the ability, of the bases themselves, and also create chaos all over the state of Hawaii. So isn't that, I guess, when you look at it from a state national effort, is there really a critical focus on the governmental interfaces, of the utilities and others through the computer systems as being one of the areas that could affect us?
Because of the three different realms that I work in, I'm the head of the National Guard, but also the Homeland Security Advisor to the Governor and the head of emergency management. We work closely with PACOM as they deal with their critical infrastructure and plan for any kind of type of response. So the interdependency of not only the Department of Defense here, but also even the private sector, working with HECO, working with the banks, working with even the airline industry, and understanding their interdependence here based on the critical infrastructure of an island state, that it's important that we all bring everything to the fight, and that we all understand each other's roles and interdependency when it comes to, say, a cyber event. So what we're trying to do here with our Fusion Center is have even working with the FBI and Department of Defense, because as you look at it there, private industry doesn't really share its cyber attacks with the FBI. They will bring the FBI or the CIA based on the criticality, but normal attacks, the PACOM commander might want to know what's everything is going on in the state of Hawaii, so that their intelligence analysts can have an understanding. Is someone trying to get to them by taking out certain things? So they're not sure what the course of a cyber war in a state would be, but as you know, in the state of Georgia, in Russia, they were attacked by cyber before any troops came in.
Well, it seems to me like if you were to be planning some type of a strike, for lack of a better word, if you could bring down the infrastructure, cause chaos in the streets of Oahu, and all heck is breaking loose, that could create the opportunity for follow-on forces, a type of thing. So I guess that when you look at this, do you talking with the Board of Water Supply, with the utilities and others, do you plan out like how do we respond if the system goes down and the chaos is in the street, so to speak, if things start to break apart, the threads start to get cut, so to speak?
Well, I think, I mean, I don't want to speak out of line. You know, the Board of Water Supply, of course, is very interested in maintaining, you know, their system. HECO is very important, understanding their system. So independently, everyone understands their role as critical. It's the interdependency and the critical node that can cause a catastrophic failure that we will really need to get to, because at some point we can't put physical defense around everything.
Yeah.
You have to figure out where the most critical nodes are and defend it both physical and with some component of cyber. So these are things we're currently working with.
And currently working on, and when you work with the private sector, you know, you brought that up earlier, it kind of caught my attention that, you know, they don't share readily the types of attacks and incursions that are happening, you know, for a wide variety of reasons.
And
but
for the right reasons for some of it. Yes.
yeah. So do you, when you're working with Fusion or others, is there, I mean, been discussion on how to encourage these companies to be able to share attacks or information quietly or confidentially with Fusion and others so that there can be an assessment and
So what we're doing with HECO, and, you know, we've been working with them for quite a bit of time, is, you know, Connie Lau and myself, we went to the Kansas Fusion Center has a great way of sharing this without compromising any information. Of course, it requires, you know, having certain kinds of equipment and having certain kinds of clearances. So we're working closely with HECO and the Kansas Fusion Center to create that type of sharing here in the state of Hawaii. Once we can get all that secured and the right equipment and everything, then we'll bring in other private sectors. Because, again, you know, if you're a private entity, you're driven by board of directors, you're driven by laws and things that may not allow you to do these things. But if we can kind of work through that, and like I said, the Kansas Fusion Center has a best practice, and that's what we're trying to emulate with the HECO right now.
to get the best practices for the utilities and others so they can
keep what they feel is very secure. We don't really see what they think, but what is important to us is shared, but it's shared in a SCIF and at a higher level so no one else sees it, but the information is shared at the right levels and only that which we need to know versus sharing everything that they have.
How prevalent is, one of the things that's come up, there's been several documentaries and things about it, has not been the state or even traditional non-state actor vis-a-vis terrorist groups, but what they call cyber vigilantes or the Falks, the classic Anonymous, or some of these groups that are out there trying to make political statements, trying to make statements of, hey, you know what, we don't agree with the U.S.'s policy here, so they make attacks and things. Is that, when you look at that, is that a serious issue, when you look at where these attacks are coming from and how to create defenses? Do these groups, how high on the radar are they for?
That part I'm not, I haven't been focused on that, but the James Bond movie Skyfall, as you can see, I mean, it is a movie, but everything that's shown in that movie is all in the realm of possibility that can happen. It may be occurring in some parts of the country already. I haven't been briefed on anything that's occurring.
It just happened to the Sony executives just recently. It was on the news, on their plane. They were attacked via cyber attack from one of these groups. So, I guess what makes this challenging to me is that they're not being motivated by what the traditional other actors are. They're being motivated by some social things within themselves, a one-upmanship game, hey, look what I did, type of thing. Does that make it harder to kind of, when you're trying to pin down these groups as far as what motivates them and where they're most likely to cause an incursion or an issue?
Yeah, I think so, because if you only look at the big bad state actors and maybe terrorists, that known entities, it's the ones that are even in your own company, that you may have a disgruntled employee that is in your system, that they can leave a bomb in there, and when they leave, it won't happen till months later. So they can say, I wasn't even employed there when this happened, but it's already happened in companies that like that.
Well, they wouldn't even have to be tech savvy. I mean, to me, one of the weaknesses or weak links in the chain is the disgruntled employee phenomenon, where you have somebody, they're ticked off, they don't like their boss, they think they're getting rooked, for lack of a better word, and what happens is they take their passwords and such, and they may not put a logic bomb or anything, but they take their passwords, and months and years later they either sell them to somebody who has, like we talked about earlier, or they decide, you know what, my life isn't going good, I haven't got that job, I'm going to go ahead and stick it to them. I'm going to log on, pull files away, start to delete things, send it out over the internet, their address and other contact information. That to me seems to be one of the most hugest weak links, because you can create an incredible architecture defense system, but if you have one person who you don't change your passwords, you don't have a protocol at all that could come back in. So do you think when Fusion moves forward that companies and others really need to look at that and have a protocol for password changing and other types of things to make sure that disgruntled employees don't come in again?
That's why I think, you have a very active mind, which is good, because if you think of only traditional things, this is a whole different era. And then, so as we even spoke with the University of Hawaii, our law programs, our business programs, people that are going to eventually be in businesses, and people that are going to be in policy and things like this need to start thinking about this, because there's going to have to need policy changes. People that are getting business degrees, when they get into business and start running their companies, these are all the things that they need to think about, and because these things are happening already, and I think it's only going to get worse.
Well, and it shows you, how things change so quickly. I mean, back, 10 years ago, your access to was through a desktop company computer, but now you have these things, and so therefore you can lock down all your stations and everything else, but a person could just go ahead, an old employee, and still have access on their phone and log in that way, and they're not coming physically into the office or the location, but they're still getting in through the corporate intranet, right?
Yeah, anytime you do something wireless, and everyone wants to go wireless, but it creates a whole different problem for cyber and cyber attacks, and the ability for any bad actor to want to get into your system. So the generation that may be leading us now, that's not, this young generation that is used to all these devices, they understand the creativity and things that can happen, but the lawmakers now need to understand that we need to start looking at policies and laws that may border on the realm of maybe people don't like them, but if we don't do that, it's going to create a problem that we might not be able to fix very easily.
Okay, that's a very good point, but we're going to go ahead and take a quick break here right away, but we're going to be right back on cyber terrorism, cyber attacks, and how do we use those who might be against us to help protect us. So we'll be right back.
Aloha, my name is Willow Chang Elion, and I host a show called The Art of Life. We air live every Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. And what we do is basically we focus on individuals who create a unique sense of place for Hawaii. These are movers and shakers, artists, innovators. They are also traditionalists. They're all involved in the archival process, and they make this place a unique place, one that makes Hawaii a richer place to be. I hope you do join us, and certainly tell your friends about the show, whether they live here or they live abroad. It's a way to give back to our community. We're keeping it pono.
Aloha, welcome back to our show. Today we are discussing cybersecurity, cyber terrorism, how we protect ourselves in the 21st century so we can take advantage of all of the things of the internet without exposing ourselves needlessly. One of the issues or groups we were talking about, outside actors, those who hack, for lack of a better word. One of the phenomenons you hear about is white hat, those who hack or do defense programs for government business entities. Black hats that are the anonymous and other groups who are out there doing this. And then the gray hats, those who engage in cyber attacks but then share their information and their discoveries with those from government and the private sector so they can better defend themselves. When you look at this, is there a discussion of how to engage gray hats or to use white hats in an attempt to thwart black hat activity that might be taking place for cybersecurity?
That's an area I haven't really looked into because some of it is more probably at a secret or higher level as they use the white hats against. Again, it is just a whole different phenomenon that we're not used to, and I think you of anybody that I've talked to are probably as well versed or more well versed than most of the general public on the issue.
Well, I think that I mean, for me to engage the gray hats, to have a recruitment of them, to go out to the schools and universities and say, hey, you want to serve your country, you want to help, you can do public service. This is a way to put your skills to use to help us So it would seem to me you'd want to engage gray hats and white hats, in security and in also counter measures as well, right?
Well, right now, anybody that has a lot of experience and understand, the world of cyber can get a very good job right now. I think, as you talk about the education piece, the president has come out with a K through 12 that you should have some component of cyber in your education. Some of the really good universities now have very good computer science programs. And then the follow-on to that is there's some very good residency type programs, fully paid, that will really focus them into cyber. The difficult thing in people working in cyber is that you need security clearances, and you won't get that in college. So working with some of the colleges, as these kids that are really good at it may work in internship, where the internship will give them the security clearances. And we're not talking about a secret, we're talking about probably a TS and higher level to really work in the world of cyber that you're talking about.
Well, that's the way to really stay ahead of the game.
Yes.
I mean, because it's like you said, you have almost this tension of, okay, we need to monitor and assess. We don't want to expose, because then they will shut off and go to another attack. But to keep an eye on them and track them long enough to understand and develop countermeasures, so when you do deploy them, it's like you surprise them. It's the surprise is going back again, so to speak.
But I mean, you bring up another good point, is as soon as someone attacks and you defend, then you've already let them know you know, and then you've given up your defense. So it's a constant creativity, because they're going to come at you a different way. And if you, again, defend and show them your defense, they're going to come at. So it is, you can't just say this is the way we're going to do it. It's like you say, it's very creative, and you're going to have to constantly change. And it's just so dynamic an environment. And that's why you really need these kids that are very, that don't think in the normal ways that we think, but are very good at and understanding cyber.
Yeah, that's a controversy with the gray hats. People say, well, the gray hats are almost just as bad, because they're taking their defense, their things, they're putting it out there to educate companies and other, but the black hats pick it up, and then they'll create another attack based upon the defense that was published by the gray hats all over the internet. So you have this catch as catch can going on almost, like one of those movies that you see right there. But it really strips down to another basic question: is how do we create a cyber-savvy workforce for the 21st century? How do we have kids who are going into all sorts of different jobs where now computers and mobility and access is part and parcel to everything, from landscaping to, is there an effort? Do you think the need for universities and other to develop cyber awareness, cyber, savviness as part of the workforce training for the next generation?
Yeah, that's why, as I mentioned earlier, the president feels K through 12, and I don't think he's just the president. I think a lot of people understand that. It'll be a generational change. It'll be a cultural change, and then as you say, so people don't feel it's a personal right that's being taken care of away from them to be able to do certain things at their work computers. It'll have to be an organizational change in the country to understand the scope of what this problem is and why it gets down to a person. It's not going to be a country, an organization, or just a department. It's going to be the individual American that understands the scope of this problem and where you could be the single point of failure into your company. That eventually, you might think you're just the smallest thing in your company, but you could be the single point of entry that could be a virus. So if you talk about, say, Ebola right now, or pandemic disease, I mean, this little thing could get to you, and all of a sudden you don't know you have it, and you're traveling all over, and it's spreading everywhere. So this is what each individual needs to understand. It could be a virus, and that's what they talk about.
Well, one of the first early viruses was called the Palestinian or Friday the 13th virus, which was spread through all of the university structures, and of course, because it was a logic bomb timed to coincide with the 46th anniversary, it went off, and of course it was all over the place. People didn't realize that it had spread to this type of thing, but a lot of it came through the universities. But now with everybody having access, it becomes a much harder, and it could be much more devastating, right? If something like that were to reemerge in the 21st century, it would be far more catastrophic than it was when it happened back in the 70s, right?
Well, Because in what you just discussed, this type of technology is just leapfrogging. So what was maybe even there 2 years ago is, I mean, that's old stuff. I mean, now you talk about Stuxnet. Before they didn't talk about it, but this is something that you and I can purchase and do something if we didn't like a certain individual or his company and things. So there's things now being sold on the open market that was very secret or top secret a few years ago. So this thing, the technology and the ways people do things have leapfrogged.
And you also have the pressure of Moore's law, you know, the fact that hardware and processing power keeps doubling and miniaturizing, and so you have a whole host of issues that come forward. Like, again, I keep waving my cell phone around every 5 minutes, but this is a classic example of Moore's law right here. When you are planning, because you plan these things out, you go through collaborative and engagement, and there's a lag of years, and then all of a sudden, when you create this strategy that works great for a dumb terminal or a desktop, now may be completely inapplicable to a mobile device.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not. You know, nowadays with your phone, I mean, your phone, I mean, you can take pictures, send pictures. Now they're even talking about turning on surveillance cameras in your home with that, so you can, when you're away, you can watch what's going on in your home, or you can turn your air conditioning or TV on. So you're manipulating things at your house, or it could be the locks in your house, right? That you could.
Do you think that there should be a standard, like, you know, for instance, some of the contractors, you know, the Office of Naval Research will tell people, look, you have to have a secure grid, secure standards, things like that. Do you think that there's going to be, in the future, government's going to come in and say, look, if you're going to put out consumer level devices that allow, there's got to be a strict standards, protocols that you have to follow before you unleash this stuff out because of what could happen?
My personal opinion, I think it's coming because the problem is just going to exacerbate itself if we don't start educating people properly on what types of things they need to get done. I mean, look at how open our airports were. Look at what it is now. But people are more aware now, and they're accepting, you know, that you have to take off your belts and your shoes and everything. So to me, I think we'll eventually get there with computers and cyber and things, but you know, it'll be a process, a cultural changes in policies, laws, that people will understand that if we don't come on board as a personal private citizen, that we're going to be a single point of failure for a company or, you know, a nation.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about personal awareness. Once people realize, and maybe that's, you know, the fact is that you have these people now, because they're, you know, at risk, because they see it's happening to average people. Now there's more of well, it's just not a company, it's a mainland thing, whatever. Like, for instance, the smart TV phenomenon. You have smart TVs with cameras on there, and there's now a way you can hack in and turn the cameras on. So people at their home, all of a sudden their TV will come on and they can be seen by somebody else and recorded, even though they don't even know their TV's on at all. In fact, they got people now who are putting, this is the biggest, sometimes this goes to the point of sometimes the best defense is something simpler, a piece of duct tape. Put it right over the camera thing when you're not using it.
And some people even tell you that, because right now some of the things that are happening where people are turning on, taking your picture, and then turning around, using it, and putting it on some official document, sending it to you, and said, you know, this is something that you need to address right now, and it shows your picture, and you say, boy, this is official because they got my picture. Little did they know they might have gotten this picture off of your
smart TV, and you can use it for credit card fraud. And again, it's credit card companies meticulously worked on the photo ID thing. It became a standard now. Now you have the photo thing on the back of a card, but it could be all null and void because, like you said, someone could take a snap a photo and print it on a card and then run all over Texas at the gas stations and have had it. You know, I mean,
well, that's exactly what we're saying. But everything now is people want to make it smarter, simpler, easier. But then, you know, we're creating what they call social criticality, where all these high-tech things and the easiness to do things are making it easier for other people to get into our system.
Yeah, and I think also, too, maybe this is a good chance for Hawaii to reassert its cultural values on the world stage, because the more technologically connected, the more vulnerable, the more catastrophic. Maybe it's time for us, like in the business world, you know what, I won't call them on my cell phone, I'll go face-to-face. I'll go meet them for a cup of coffee. I'll make that human connection. Maybe sometimes the human connection could be the best defense on the cyber front. You know, getting people to engage in a non-cyber exclusive relationship, right?
Well, I mean, you bring up another great point, is that, you know, in the days of emailing and texting and everything, we forgot how to talk to one another.
Yeah.
We're sending texts, like my kids will text me and say, why don't you just call me?
Yeah, I know. You can pick up
My
the phone and call
secretary
me.
is just a wall away, and she's sending me emails, and I'll pound on the wall and say, will you come in here and let's just sit down and talk about this. So you bring up a really good point. We're getting way too...
People create these silos. It's like, you know, you see, a friend of mine tell me about that. You know, their kids are on the couch next to each other and they're texting each other while they're sitting next to each other rather than talking as a family. You see it, it's funny at the airports, you know, the whole family's sitting there, everybody's on their cell phone, you know, it's like, okay, where's the connection, you know, between you as a family, you as a group, and maybe that is one of the, sometimes the most simplest solutions can help to address these things.
Yeah, I say we're getting away from being humans. I mean, we're letting technology overrun us. You know, I was eating lunch somewhere and I saw, you know, two young couples, you know, their friends are eating lunch, but like you're saying, after lunch, everyone is, rather than talking to each other over, you know, a cup of coffee or anything, everyone's on their cell phones, texting people or doing something. So you just watch that and say, gee, you know, they could have had lunch in separate offices and then and still be connected to
and doesn't it also creates a super vulnerable, there was a white paper done or a paper done that came out, unfortunately it was published the same day as the 9/11 Commission report on EMPs and the vulnerability of the United States to a high level EMP above knocking out our infrastructure, our cyber and everything else. And this was done obviously back before. But now, don't you think that this type of thing also the fact that you could have one event like that bring down the entire internet and the grid, and that people are so dependent on this that they become unable to function, and it's going to come back to how strong a community is, right?
Well, if you just look at what happens in a natural disaster where power goes out, people don't have water, and then then sanitary things happen. So if you were to take down a city, or say Oahu here, and you want to bring PACOM or someone else down to its knees, you take out the power grid, people are all on a separate system, I mean all on a backup system, but that's only going to run for, then the water goes out, then, you know, then people sanitation becomes a problem, food becomes a problem, just the basic needs of a society becomes a problem. And then you can affect something that you really want to do by taking them down to their knees.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for people to function on the job if they're worried about their families and not being able to. But, you know, I really think that we are, and what we have in Hawaii makes us resilient, because I go back to the earthquake that happened about 15 years ago when all the lights and powers and everything went down here. Instead of like in the mainland, chaos and people rioting, breaking the streets, there were people who were literally going into the intersections and playing directional, and people were literally stopping as if the lights were on, letting each other through. And because of that aloha community spirit, hey, we're going to all help each other, it could have been a lot worse in talking to people over here than what it was. And so maybe that is one of the strengths we have that's inherent to us, you know, in case these dark days do come upon us.
No, you again bring up another great point. You know, during Iniki, and then even some small thing with Puna, you know, the community comes together. You know, the people that have are giving to the people that have not. So, I mean, they're not fighting over who's going to, you know, have enough water. Everyone's sharing, and that's the important thing. In Puna, you had people coming up from Hilo without being asked. They knew the area. They knew people needed the roads clear, so they were up there with their own power saws and heavy equipment. People brought food and were just giving it out. So our culture here, the culture of aloha and just the thing of sharing is important. And that's going to make us resilient in these times when people start, again, taking power away, which takes water away. It could affect our sewage systems. So all these things are going to get down to just the basics of, you know, what we need to make us survive.
Excellent. Well, we're going to wrap it on up here. Is there any URL or place for people who are interested in this, you know, perhaps from the education for their company or how to prepare their company? Is there any place that they could turn to, you know, for Homeland Security to get tips and guidance or ideas on how to make a more cyber secure workplace or to be more aware?
Based on I'm glad you asked that. Based on the bill that you helped shepherd and pass, I think the cyber coordinator in Hawaii, we need to develop these types of a site that people can go on. It's almost like an emergency management site where you go on, how do you prepare? And then if something were to happen, what else do you need and things like that. So these are some of the things that we need to create here. I'm not sure, DHS may have a site that people can go on to, but again, it's more probably at a bigger level than what you and I would like at a personal, at a family level, and then maybe at a small company. Because the major companies are driven by other national type information.
Excellent. Well, Aloha, it's not just a handshake protocol. It could be a defense in case things go from cyber to non-cyber. Well, thank you, General Wong, so much for joining us today. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be back again next Wednesday for another exciting subject as we go ahead and we face our future. Aloha and have a great week.